February 5, 2025, Hyderabad, the bustling capital of Telangana state, is still immersed in the hustle and bustle of a technology metropolis. Amidst the sparkling lights of the wealthy Banjara Hills neighborhood, no one expected that in a quiet apartment a marital tragedy was quietly coming to an end. That night, as the clock struck midnight, a woman's heart-rending scream shattered the usual peace. Minutes later, the entire neighborhood was awakened by the terrible news. Rakesh Verma, a 34-year-old software engineer, was found lying motionless on his bed, his eyes half open as if he had not yet spoken his last words. The police arrived quickly, but the story they saw was completely different from the truth. His young wife, Priya Sharma, hugged her husband and cried, shaking and insisting that he had died of a sudden heart attack. But no one expected that behind those tears was a bloody plot that had been hatched for weeks. And just half a year later, in early August 2025, in the courtroom of Hyderabad city, this whole shocking story will be exposed. A case that shocked the Indian public. Let's find out more about this case right after this. Rakesh was born into a well-off middle-class family in Vijayawada. His father is a retired civil servant, and his mother is a retired teacher. He is the pride of his family as he graduated with honors in software engineering and was quickly recruited into a large technology company in high-tech city Hyderabad. In the eyes of his colleagues, Rakesh is a model husband, gentle, hardworking, and rarely complains. At home, he is a caring father to his young son Arav, often taking him to school, teaching him to play Ludo, and telling him bedtime stories. But few people know that behind that facade, Rakesh is having an affair with a female colleague. A secret that even he did not expect would lead to a tragic ending. Priya was a gentle girl, a former English teacher at a private school in Hyderabad. After getting married, she retired to take care of her family, willing to sacrifice her career to devote herself to her husband and children. That seemingly peaceful life began to crack when Priya discovered unusual signs. Her husband often came home late, his phone was locked, and the smile he gave to others no longer appeared when he was with his wife. Anita, a young colleague at the tech company where Rakesh works, is the focus of internal gossip. She is the one who ignites conflict in the Verma's seemingly stable marriage. The small house in Banjara Hills, a quiet, prosperous neighborhood, was where Priya and Rakesh lived with their son. To their neighbors, they were the model family, successful husband, caring wife, well-behaved son. But behind closed doors, arguments, silent tears, and growing doubts had turned the house into a ticking time bomb. In the final months of 2024, cracks began to appear in Rakesh and Priya's family picture. At first, it was just small details. Rakesh often came home late, making excuses for working overtime or urgent meetings at work. His phone was always password protected, and whenever a message came in, he would leave the room or turn the screen face down. Priya, sensitive as she was, couldn't ignore it. One day, while doing laundry, she found a bill from a fancy restaurant, dated and timed exactly the same day Rakesh had announced he was going on a business trip to Bengaluru. The suspicion turned into a lingering wound, and family conversations became increasingly tense. When Priya repeatedly asked, Rakesh denied it. He even snapped, "You are too suspicious. I work all day and am tired, and then I get interrogated when I get home." Those words were like a knife, making Priya feel both hurt and despised. The truth was finally revealed. One evening in late December 2024, Priya secretly opened her husband's phone while he was taking a shower. In the inbox, she was shocked to see a series of intimate messages from Rakesh and Anita Rao, a colleague at the company. The love letters and secret dates were undeniable evidence. From that moment on, two fires burned inside Priya, betrayed love and tormented pride. She thought about divorce, but she was afraid of her son's eyes, afraid of social criticism, and also afraid of losing everything after so many years of sacrifice. The family's quarrels became more and more intense. Neighbors like Mrs. Laxmi Iyer sometimes heard screams echoing through the thin walls. Meanwhile, Rakesh was getting deeper and deeper into his affair. He often made excuses to go on business trips, spending more time with Anita. Priya was left alone in her own house, her mind gradually falling into despair. She began to harbor a dark thought. If he could betray her without remorse, then she could end it all in another way. On the night of February 5th, 2025, Hyderabad was plunged into a cool darkness. Above, the glass towers of high-tech city were still glowing, but in the small apartment in Banjara Hills, a bloody script was being written. Priya had prepared in advance. In the kitchen drawer there was a bottle of strong sedatives, smuggled from a drugstore in the suburbs. She spent the rest of the day like a shadow, taking care of the children, cooking, cleaning, all normal. But in her heart she had made a decision. Around 10 p.m., Rakesh returned home, tired, his shirt wrinkled, the scent of an unfamiliar perfume lingering on his collar. He absent-mindedly ate a few bites of rice and then buried his face in his phone. Priya remained silent, bringing out a glass of hot milk, a habit Rakesh had maintained for many years. But this time, in that glass of milk was a dose of medicine enough to knock anyone out. Rakesh took a gulp, without a doubt. 15 minutes later, his eyelids were heavy, his steps faltering. He collapsed onto the bed, gasping for air, his arms powerless. Priya stood beside him, her eyes bloodshot, her heart pounding. All the days of suffering, the times of being ignored, the long nights of tears rolling down her pillow. It all came rushing back. In that brief moment, reason gave way to darkness. She grabbed the pillow and pressed it tightly against Rakesh's face. At first he struggled weakly, kicking the floor, trying to shake it off, but the drugs had paralyzed his body. His wheezing gradually subsided until the room was deathly silent. When it was all over, Priya let go, her body shaking. She looked at her husband one last time. His eyes were still open, wide open, as if he couldn't believe that the wife he once trusted was the one who ended his life. In the quiet apartment, the only sound was the ticking of the clock. Outside, the city was still bustling, but within those four walls, a family had just been torn apart forever. Early in the morning of February 6th, 2025, the Banjara Hills neighborhood was still sleepy. The first rays of the morning sun shone through the green trees, and birds chirped. But in the Verma family apartment, the atmosphere was unusually stifling and heavy. At around 6 a.m., Lakshmi Iyer, a neighbor who lived across the street, suddenly heard a loud cry coming from the Verma apartment. Worried, she knocked on the door. The scene that appeared shocked her. Priya sat on the floor, hugging her husband's body, sobbing in despair. On the bed, Rakesh Verma lay motionless, his face purple, his eyes half open as if still haunted by terror. Immediately, neighbors called the police and an ambulance. The news spread quickly and several people in the neighborhood gathered in the hallway, whispering and gossiping. At around 6:30 a.m., a patrol car from the Banjara Hills police station arrived with an ambulance. The nurses did a quick check and shook their heads. Rakesh had been dead for hours. There were no obvious injuries on his body, leading to the initial diagnosis of a stroke in his sleep. Inspector Ravi Deshmukh was there surveying the scene. He noticed a few unusual details. The half-finished glass of milk on the table, the unusually pale color of the victim's lips, and the strange tension in Priya's eyes. While the wife held her husband, crying, her hands shaking, her gaze held more than pain, a look of panic mixed with fear of being discovered. The police decided to cordon off the scene. Rakesh's body was taken to the forensic center for an autopsy. The entire apartment was sealed off. The scene was photographed, and the glass of milk and a few packs of pills that were left in the kitchen drawer were seized. Outside, the neighbors were chattering nonstop. Everyone was heartbroken over the seemingly happy family now torn apart by tragedy. But few knew that just a few days later, the truth behind Rakesh's death would shock the entire neighborhood. Immediately after sealing off the apartment, the police began collecting evidence. On the living room coffee table, they found a glass of milk with a white residue. Next to it was a stainless steel spoon. In the kitchen, a drawer under the sink contained several blister packs of sedatives, the type alprazolam, usually prescribed only for severe insomnia. These traces immediately caught the attention of Inspector Ravi Deshmukh. At the Hyderabad Forensic Center, forensic doctors performed an autopsy on Rakesh Verma. The results were shocking. The victim had a concentration of benzodiazepines many times higher than the therapeutic level in his blood, along with signs of respiratory failure leading to death. In addition, there were slight marks on the nose and mouth, consistent with being pressed with a soft object, possibly a pillow. The forensic conclusion: the victim died of asphyxiation after being weakened by sedatives. This completely ruled out the possibility of spontaneous stroke. The police began to reconstruct the timeline. They checked the building's hallway cameras. No one had entered or left the apartment from 9 p.m. that night until the neighbors discovered it early in the morning. This narrowed the suspect down to the wife, Priya Sharma. When they checked the drug purchase history, they discovered that Priya had visited a small pharmacy in Hyderabad a week ago. The shopkeeper clearly remembered. She bought the medicine because her husband had insomnia, but her facial expression was very different. Rakesh's phone also revealed the truth, a series of love messages between him and his colleague, Anita Rao. This was the biggest motive leading to the tragedy. At first, Priya vehemently denied the charges, crying and saying she was innocent. But faced with overwhelming evidence, from forensic results, the pharmacy owner's testimony to the adultery text messages, she gradually fell into a deadlock. During the third interrogation, after many hours of silence, Priya burst into tears and confessed, "I didn't want to kill him, but seeing the betrayal every day, I couldn't take it anymore. I sacrificed everything for this family. And yet he chose someone else. I just wanted to end my pain." The confession silenced the entire interrogation room. Priya was transferred to Chanchalguda Women's Prison to await trial. In early August 2025, the Hyderabad City Court was packed. Media, reporters, and curious onlookers had gathered to watch one of the most high-profile trials of the year, the case of Priya Sharma murdering her husband, software engineer Rakesh Verma. The atmosphere in the courtroom was thick with tension. Priya appeared in a pale sari, her face haggard after nearly half a year in detention. She sat silently, her hands shaking, occasionally bowing her head to hide her tears. In the back row, Rakesh's parents looked tearfully at their daughter-in-law, whom they had once considered their own daughter. As for Arav, just 6 years old, he was placed in the care of relatives, away from the attention of the press. The prosecutor began in a firm voice. This was not an accident, not a moment of anger. This was a deliberate, premeditated murder. The defendant bought sedatives, planned it, and carried it out when the victim was completely helpless. The evidence was presented one by one, the forensic results showing signs of asphyxiation, the receipt for the purchase of medicine from the Hyderabad pharmacy, Rakesh's adulterous text messages, all of which formed a clear picture of the motive and the crime. The defense lawyer sought mitigation, arguing that Priya was in a severely traumatized state, driven by betrayal and family pressure. This is not just a crime, it is a social tragedy. Women are trapped in hopeless marriages, he stressed. After several days of deliberation, the trial chamber delivered its verdict. The judge declared, Priya Sharma guilty of murder under IPC Section 302. Sentence: life imprisonment, no parole for the first 14 years. The courtroom fell silent. Rakesh's mother burst into tears, his father bowed his head, and Priya collapsed into her chair, her hands covering her face in disbelief. The trial ended, but its echoes echoed throughout Hyderabad. A case that had not only destroyed a man and a woman, but also left a lasting scar on the soul of a 6-year-old. The Priya Sharma, Rakesh Verma case has come to an end, but its echoes still linger. A family once considered exemplary, now torn apart by betrayal and hidden hatred. The husband is dead, the wife is in prison, and the child is growing up alone with haunting memories. This is not just a story about a murder. It is a mirror that reflects the dark corners of marriage. When love is no longer a sharing but a burden, when trust is replaced by suspicion, and when dialogue is stifled by silence and lies. If Rakesh had chosen to be honest instead of hiding, If Priya had chosen the legal path or divorce instead of violence, perhaps this tragedy would not have happened. But the word if will forever be just regret. For society, this is a reminder. Do not underestimate the destructive power of betrayal and jealousy. For every family, this is a wake-up call. Marriage requires honesty, dialogue, and respect, rather than suffering in silence. And finally, for each of us, this story sends a message. When trust is broken, seek the light of justice instead of letting the darkness in your heart lead you to crime.